Want to plan your next fishing trip without the hassle? FishingBooker.com is the best way to find and book a fishing charter anywhere in the world. Whether you're chasing trophy fish or just looking for a family day on the water, Fishing Booker makes it simple, fast, and secure. With thousands of experienced guides, verified reviews, and 24/7 customer support, Fishing Booker takes the guesswork out of planning. Visit FishingBooker.com and book your trip today. Fishing Booker. Fishing trips made easy.
Friends of NRA is your chance to support our Second Amendment rights and preserve America's hunting traditions. Join Friends of NRA at one of our 600 exciting events nationwide. From games to auctions and exclusive firearms, Friends of NRA events are your chance to support a cause you care about while having a great time with patriots in your community. Whether you're a seasoned shooter, an avid hunter or outdoorsman, or passionate about freedom, there's a place for you within Friends of NRA. Visit friendsofnra.org to find an event near you. Stand up for freedom with the Friends of NRA.
In this episode, we're exploring the role of trapping in North American history and its relevance today. We'll discuss sustainable fur harvesting, the edibility of fur-bearing mammals, and the ways hunters and trappers could make the most of their harvest. Plus, we'll talk to you about wild game cooking and some favorite dishes from the field. Grab a beer, and let's get started. Or not a beer. Anyway.
Join Justin Townsend and the Harvesting Nature crew as they explore the world of cooking wild fish and game while sharing recipes, tips, tricks, and lessons learned from their pursuit of wild food. We sure hope you ate before the show, 'cause you're gonna leave hungry. This is the Wild Fish and Game Podcast.
Before we introduce our guests and before we get into sort of the meat of the conversation here, we'll do a bit of an intro. We're shopping dates for our next pig camp here in Texas in December. We haven't finalized those yet, but look for those in the next coming weeks. We'll get those planned on the calendar and make a huge announcement with fireworks and sparklers and all those crazy things to let the world know that we're doing another wild pig camp. Coming up on a restock of the Big Game Blend. Just punched the order in yesterday, so it should be 2 or 3 weeks. We'll have that back in the shop. We're also migrating to a new shop platform. That's going to be news, so I'll explain all that at a later date. But we're trying to make some tweaks and edits and make things better, and that's one of the things on the list of things to make better. So outside of that, I'm trying to think hunting, fishing, cooking. I made a really delicious sauerbraten. It's like a German roast today. Used it with a whitetail shank in the slow cooker while I was at class. So I came back and I now understand. I think this is the second time I made it. The first time I made that dish, I made it with a venison roast, and I don't recall the cut, but I wasn't very happy with the way it turned out. I made it this way, and it's so ironic because I put a lot of love and care and attention to the first one, and this one I just dumped all the ingredients in the slow cooker and just turned it on and left. Came back, and it's one of those situations where it's on the counter in a bowl, and I keep walking past it, and every time I walk past it, I have to like take a little nibble of it. It's it's good then. Yeah. So I'm pleased with it. I got to figure out what to do with it beyond that. There's probably be some like roasted cabbage and some spätzle and like lots of delicious German things. I also have this braising liquid to reduce down into a gravy. With that, Adam, what you got?
Not a whole lot. This time of year, there's not too much happening, but I'm just making plans with my buddy for this spring's turkey hunt. So I'm already getting a little bit excited about that. We still got a ways to go yet, but I'm really looking forward to that. I got 2 turkeys last time I went out with him, so hopefully I can manage to do that again. Other than that, I've just been testing recipes like crazy, cooking up a storm. My fridge is so full right now, it's ridiculous. There's only 2 of us, so if anyone wants to come over to help me eat all this food I keep making, come on over. Other than that, just kind of chilling. I've been doing a little bit of ice fishing, but like no luck at all. So maybe better off just staying inside and cooking and keeping warm.
Sounds like it. It's a good plan. Yeah. I was just thinking too, I was looking the other day, scouting out the dates for turkey season, and I can't believe, so Florida, where I'm a resident, despite my home in D.C., residence in Florida, actually turkey season opens in like less than 30 days, I think. Probably less than 20 at this point. It's pretty early season that kicks off because it gets very warm there very quickly. So, but next up on the podcast, we're going to be chatting with Brendan McGuire and Anthony Grogan from the Irish Hunting Podcast. And so Adam and I talked early this year, at the end of last year, we wanted to bring in some of our international hunting community beyond North America. And so this is the first up of our round of guests. I think we're going to shoot for quarterly to have like kind of an international hunting or fishing themed episode. So we'll be chatting with these guys about what it's like to hunt in Ireland, what they're hunting, how they're hunting, and then also too, of course, we're going to talk about loads and loads of food and all that fun stuff. So tune in for that. That'll be out probably in a couple weeks, but you'll enjoy the episode. All right. Today's guest was born and raised in Nova Scotia and has worked in both Ottawa and Nunavut. His work has included advising government officials on federal, provincial, and territorial matters, including fisheries, sustainable development, and the seal hunt. He's also worked for the Canadian branch of World Wildlife Fund as the head of Arctic Fisheries Program and co-chair of Green Budget Coalition. His current role is as the executive director of the Fur Institute of Canada, as well as collaborating with their project, The Truth About Fur, providing accurate information about the fur industry from leading North American and international authorities. Doug Chiasson, welcome to the Wild Fishing Game podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, super excited. I love a good chat.
Yeah.
I'm really excited you were able to join us, and this topic, thinking about it from like a hunter's perspective, I don't know why, but there's always a little bit of a division in what seems like hunters and trappers.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, because we're all kind of same but different.
Yeah, we're always kind of just on the edge of conversations about hunting. Mm-hmm. And, in some cases that's because trappers and hunters, are after the same animals. When we talk about stuff like wolves and bears and, to a lesser extent, bobcats and lynx and coyotes. But, I think that there's kind of slowly but surely a turning of the page as more hunters get more plugged into the idea of predator management and managing land for game animals. Trapping can be an important part of that, whether that's waterfowl or big game. There's something to be said about being a hunter who either is a trapper or has a buddy who is a trapper. And, we're doing what we can to try and become more a part of the conversation.
Yeah, and I think to me it's always struck me, I don't know why as hunters or just largely people in pursuit of game kind of subdivide ourselves, right? You've got like houndsmen, you've got like bird hunters, you've got big game hunters, you've got western hunters, you've got eastern hunters, stand hunters, trappers, like everybody kind of subcategorizes, and in some sense there's oftentimes ironically a little bit of infighting when it comes for who wants to be seen as like the right or correct method, and then what I hope to see, and what I've seen a little bit of, when we've had issues like the mountain lion stuff come up in Colorado here and in the States, of like kind of like a banding together of those groups. And that to me is very promising and hopeful.
And I mean, we even have our own divisions within the fur world, right? We've got trappers, fur farmers, you got snare guys versus foothold trappers. We'll always find a reason to disagree with each other, but at the very least we're finding more and more opportunities to band together and try and guard the gate against the antes. And I think that's one thing from the fur world, is that we've had a lot more firsthand experience with the antes. And that's something that we can bring to the community is, when we see stuff like the ballot initiative in Colorado to go after bobcat hunting and lynx hunting and cougar hunting. It's the same groups that we've been dealing with for 40, 50 years in some cases, even longer here in Canada, because so many of these groups trace their way back to fighting against the seal hunt in the 60s and 70s. That's really what turbocharged a lot of these groups and made them able to raise millions of dollars back then that, they've been able to live off the interest now, because they've had all that money sitting in the bank account since then. And, that's one thing that, we're becoming a lot more cognizant of is our ability to take, hey, here's what we've learned over the last 40, 50 years and bring that to the hunting community and say, here's exactly what they're going to do to you or try to do to you, because they did it to the seal hunters and they were partially successful, partially unsuccessful. Then when they got done with that, they came after the trappers. They tried to take down trapping, and we did, we had an ISO standard and we had the Agreement on International Humane Trapping Standards, and and then they kind of moved on from trappers and said, well, we got everything we're going to get. Now we're going to go after the fur farmers. And they went after the fur farmers, and in some places they were successful, in some places they weren't. And then they either went back to the beginning and started through the cycle again, or they moved on either to other animal agriculture or to hunting.
It's been wild. I think over the last couple of years, I've paid more, I would say probably the last 10 years or so, paid more to the narrative of the interaction between, the anti-hunters and the hunters, and just the community at large, I think. And it's interesting because I think growing up as a kid, hunting and fishing, you never had the thought. To us, it was very lifestyle based, like being Native American from Oklahoma. It's like, all right, it's ingrained. Like you go out, you hunt, you fish, you do all these things. And it's like, you never thought at any point anybody would try to challenge that because it was such an integral part of society. But then as I moved away from home and kind of stepped into the real world and saw like, oh, wow, no, there's these people that really don't want us to do this.
And I mean, the scary part is, you go back to, I don't know how old you guys are, but, go back to my father's generation. For his generation, it was just as normal to go trap as it was for us to go hunt and fish. Mm-hmm. We all had people in I grew up in the middle of nowhere, town of 250 people on the Salmon River in Cape Breton. There was a time where people could make good money trapping. Like that was what they did in the winter. And then, in the fall, maybe they'd guide hunting, back in the kind of 50s, 60s, there was a lot of Americans would come up to Canada because there wasn't a whole lot of deer left in the lower 48. Mm-hmm. So they'd come up to Canada to hunt deer. You'd do a bit of guiding, and then through the winter you'd trap, and then into the spring and summer you'd fish or farm. That rural lifestyle in a lot of ways has become degraded. Like it's very difficult now for someone to put together a life, even in these rural and remote communities, with kind of those 3 or 4 different things you do in kind of the changing of the seasons. And even people in those communities now are working a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday type job, or working in, resource development somewhere where they're flying away halfway across the country or halfway around the world for 3 weeks and then come home for a week and then go back to the job site. So it's one of those things that in trying to communicate that to people who just have no frame of reference mm-hmm. for what that life was like at one point. And in some places not that long ago. And I mean, even, I can say I've had the privilege of working with Inuit communities in northern Canada. And for a lot of people in those communities, it is still that way. There is still times of the year where you do certain things to make sure that you have food in the freezer or food in the cache out in the permafrost for the winter. And then maybe during the winter, you go and work construction or something in the community, help build the new health center. But, or vice versa. In the winter, you're hunting and fishing, and then in the summer you're doing construction work or working to field tech for researchers that are there to research waterfowl or whatever. The place on the map behind me, Santa Kilowak, the Belcher Islands, tons of waterfowl research, because there's really cool things going on with waterfowl there. So like that is a stream of income for certain people in the community in certain times of the year, and helping people kind of break out of that idea of not everybody forever has worked a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday job can be very difficult for people in an urban or suburban scenario, because for them 3 or 4 generations back they were still working Monday to Friday 9 to 5 jobs.
Yeah, it's so true. Like I grew up in London, Ontario, southwestern Ontario, so there are hunters and stuff around, but not in the city. I didn't meet any, I didn't know of any, I didn't hear of any. Trapping was even way further beyond even hunting. And it wasn't until I went out to northern Alberta and I worked up there as a backcountry ranger, and I met trappers for the first time, and I ended up working with an old trapper who was getting his supplemental income through the summer by working for the government as a ranger himself. So I was out on the Clearwater River in northern Alberta, and it was my first exposure not only to that very different and awesome lifestyle that he lived, but just the fact that these guys existed. Yeah. That it wasn't like a thing out of the past from the, you know, the pioneer days. That this is still a viable thing, and he made his living off of it. But that was so far out of my realm. And I was someone who was like very open to the idea of it too, not, you know, and it just still wasn't, just didn't even occur to me.
Just without the exposure to it, right? And that's, you know, probably more than anything else, you know, the conversations that I have in my job as executive director of the Fur Institute, you know, first and foremost is convincing people to buy fur and like just saying buy fur repeatedly. But secondly is like trapping is not only history. You know, trapping is an enormous part of our history in North America, especially in Canada. But there's still trappers. There's still, our best guess is about 45,000 trappers across the country. And that's not nothing. You know, and I'm not saying that every one of those guys is making their income off of that. But 40 years ago or 45 years ago, it was not unreasonable to make, you know, a very significant portion of your annual income, if not your entire annual income, off of trapping. And there's still people, especially in remote communities, that still make a sizable portion of their family's income off of trapping.
I want to roll back a little bit. We dug in quick.
Sorry, I got off my soapbox.
No. We're going to get there. We'll put you back on it. I do want to talk about, to kind of develop the background for it all, and for those that may not know, because we have a very mixed listening crowd, but what kind of role did trapping of fur-bearing mammals play in sort of history?
Right. So, I mean, in North America, I mean, and there's a whole nother kettle of fish of the history of trapping and fur in Europe, which is super interesting, and I know very little about. But in North America, you know, in a lot of ways, our map is built around trapping and around fur. You know, places like Montreal exist because they were the site of fur trading posts. You know, people often ask, you know, they see a map of like northern Canada and they're like, why are all these towns named Factory? There was no manufacturing in along the Hudson Bay coast in northern Ontario. You know, why is the town Moose Factory where they make all the moose? Like, why are these towns called Factory? And it's because that was what the Hudson Bay posts were called. So, like, Moose Factory was the Hudson Bay Company post back in the 1700s. York Factory, there's a few others. And it's right back to, like, the war. There were wars, you know, the Beaver Wars in the early 1600s between the Iroquois and various Algonquin nations, with the Dutch and the English on the side of the Iroquois and the French on the side of the Algonquin nations. You know, that reshaped the map in the Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes region, completely shifted the balance of power between Indigenous nations. And then those same alliances, you know, came back in future wars, you know, 7 Years' War, the War of 1812, even, and helped set where the border is between the U.S. and Canada. You know, the Hudson Bay Company tried to keep Americans out of the Oregon Territory by creating a fur desert around the Oregon Territory and saying, well, the mountain men won't keep coming west if there's no more beavers. So we need to go. The snake brigades went to go and try and trap out all of the beavers around the Oregon Territory so that the Americans wouldn't keep going west and connect to the Oregon Territory, and that the Oregon Territory would join with British Columbia. Unsuccessfully, I might add.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so like there's like geopolitics was influenced by trapping. You know, the richest man in the world at one point, John Jacob Astor, like the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York, was built by a family that made their money in the fur trade.
Wow.
And opium trade, I will admit, but he diversified after a while. But you know, he was one of the biggest buyers of beaver in North America, and one of the people that was, you know, a go-between for beaver pelts coming out of the American West and going to Europe. And he was the richest man in the world. He was the first multi-millionaire in the USA, and he made it off of fur.
That's awesome. Why are furs so sought after?
I mean, because fur is awesome, I think is the the best way to describe it.
You guys have a T-shirt that says that? Fur is awesome.
We should.
Yeah.
If we make one, I'll send you one because it was your idea. But it's true. Like, fur is a spectacular product, and it's one thing that we often have these discussions around, like, because we're fighting the antis and we're fighting again. We get bound up in defending what we do instead of selling what we produce. And the more people that just think our product is awesome, and if we can provide them, we spend a lot of time talking about permission to buy. Like, what is it that we need to do to create this scenario whereby someone is willing to walk into a fur salon and buy a fur coat? Because if we can get them through the door, the product will sell itself just about. It's something that we're grappling with in the age of online shopping. You can't walk in and feel the coat, and feel the. I'll grab a prop. One of my skunk mitts here is, you walk in and feel this. I mean, skunk isn't the top of the line fur by any means, but they're funny because they're skunk dogs. But fur is a spectacular product. It's biodegradable, it's organic, it's free range, it's not going to be a burden on your great-grandchildren. It'll be an heirloom for your grandchildren. You can take a coat, you can remodel it as fashion changes and style changes. You can take your grandmother's coat and restyle it into something modern and cool. You can turn it into teddy bears or throw pillows or a blanket. It's recyclable. It's really, in a twisted kind of way, we kind of had a lot of the stuff figured out we needed to figure out when it came to fashion, and we got pulled away from that into fast fashion and synthetics.
Fast fashion, yep.
A lynx coat is still a lynx coat, or a mink coat is still a mink coat. There's a timeless aspect to it. There's a vintage aspect to it, and there's also some really cool cutting edge modern techniques that people are putting together some really impressive modern pieces. And, that's the fashion side of it, but it's also functional for people that spend a lot of time snowmobiling or in the woods hunting even. I'd love to see more of the big hunting brands have their muffs for people in tree stands. Like, I'd love to see more of those lined with raccoon instead of synthetic.
Yeah,
definitely.
Because we have some incredible, naturally made North American sourced product that will do a better job of keeping you warm than a synthetic.
Oh man, yeah, I was thinking about that. I was looking at the bomber hats with they have the fur on the inside and the outside is normally like the reverse leather or cloth, and I was looking for one that was like blaze orange so I could wear it while I was out hunting during firearm season. Yeah. But you look all over the internet and you can't find like one that is not synthetic. And that's why I was very frustrated in that. I was like, man, I really want one that's just made from actual fur that I can use. And I was like, I'm going to resort to just going and shooting or trapping the appropriate animal to construct one myself.
Yeah, I swear I saw one in the last few days. If I can remember who it was that made it, I'll
email me. Yeah.
Because I feel like I saw that recently. But, it's the snowmobile market, the ski, the kind of après ski vibe. There's, if you go to the big ski hills of the world, you see fur. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're, not that I'm ever there because I'm a redneck, but like, if I was ever invited, when I see the pictures on Instagram of, San Moritz and stuff, it's people wearing fur coats and fur hats and stuff and fur boots. That's one thing that as we kind of work our way into weaseling, pun completely intended, our way as trappers into the broader hunting community is to say, like, hey, this is an option. Like, this is something that there may be, it'd be great to see insert big camo brand here actually seriously look at putting coyote ruffs on coats and, raccoon or muskrat, beaver inside their muffs and inside their hats. Like, it works for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Yeah.
So no reason it wouldn't work for hunters.
It seems like an untapped potential for a business, because that is a large community of people who are likely not against fur, because they kill animals as part of their pastime. So I think I'm just running through all the hunters I know in my head, and I think they would all be so happy to have this, like a something that was very like a utility kind of tool or muff or coat or something, or hat that was for Lent. I think they would all be happy. It's a wonder that no one's taken advantage of that yet, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, maybe we should delete all of this and we can go.
Yeah,
delete it. We're going to start a new business.
Watch out, First Light. We're coming for you.
Yeah. Call it Fur First.
Yeah,
there we go. It's just called First Light.
Yeah, fur.
Yeah. I want to talk about the food a little bit. What are the most common animals that you see people trapping these days? Both nuisance, I think, because there's obviously that side of it. Growing up of trapping, that's what I knew, is like purposeful nuisance trapping. And then you've got sort of like the other side of it. Could you expand on both?
For sure. So, I mean, the most common, really in the most common are in both nuisance and for the commercial trade in terms of like raw numbers. Muskrat, beaver, coyote, raccoon.
Do you guys get much nutria up there?
No, so we don't have any nutria in Canada that we know of. I know that there's a couple provinces have like proactively put nutria on their invasive species laws or invasive species regulations, because they're like, when the first one gets here, we want you to shoot it.
Mm-hmm. That's a good plan.
But yeah, so we don't really see much nutria. I also am active in kind of the international space, and certainly talking to my counterpart in Argentina, where nutria come from. There's certainly some nutria is still part of the kind of global fur market for sure, but not something that we have here in Canada quite yet.
Justin, if they're trapped down your way, or are they shot?
Mostly shot. I don't know that there's been a market created for it. Ironically, I think this week is the Nutria Festival in Louisiana, which there's an active event there called Nutria Tossing, which I was looking at it and I'm just kind of like a little taken aback, because to me, I see a lot of potential in a product that's being treated like a bar entertainment toy, when in reality, like it's a food source. It's a source for fur. There's significant use from something, and I think, I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts on that, but I'll save them for another podcast episode. But I think there's small pockets. You've got some in Oregon. I don't think trapping has occurred there. I think they've almost eliminated that population there from what I've heard. And then I'm trying to recollect if there's some on the East Coast, kind of mid-Atlantic.
There were in Chesapeake Bay, I think.
Yeah.
I think they've successfully eliminated the population.
And I think the problem with Louisiana is because those certain areas are fairly remote and hard to get to, that it's hard to eliminate, versus like the Chesapeake and Oregon. They can do some strategic targeting, I think, on those, and the Oregon population was pretty small from what I recall.
Yeah, I mean, and unfortunately, a lot of these situations have come from either from like fur farm escapes or from market crashes 100 years ago, and people just cut all the nutria loose.
Yeah,
we see similar things in other parts of the world, or even here in Canada, we've seen it. There's certainly areas where you see a whole lot more. Your red fox population, you see a lot more cross fox and silver fox in it than probably naturally you should, because 80 years ago the price of fox dropped, and somebody who had 100 silver fox, just opened the pens, and they made their way out into the wilderness and crossbred with the local red fox population. And now, instead of like whatever 0.02% of the red foxes that have the mutation to be silvers, they now like 10% of the population are silver fox.
Oh, wow.
So outside, sort of, we talked about nutria, fox, muskrat. What are some of the other big species?
Yeah, I mean, there's still quite a bit of trapping of coyote especially in the prairie provinces here in Canada. Unfortunately, the coyote market is a lot softer today than it was 10 years ago. But still a lot of work on that for like agriculture, nuisance control, as well as the commercial fur trade, trying to just keep coyote numbers down. And coyotes are really great at reproducing, so it's very difficult to keep coyote populations down. Another big one would be raccoon, another species that you get in both nuisance scenarios and for the commercial trade. The raccoon market is also pretty soft right now due to the sanctions on Russia. Raccoon is very, very popular in Russia and Ukraine. But with the war in Ukraine, there's sanctions preventing the sale of luxury goods, including fur, into Russia. So it's certainly done a number on the raccoon market.
There was some raccoons. I used to live in Toronto for a while, and there was some raccoons there that you could make a coat out of one of them, I think.
There's some monsters in Ottawa too. There's some monster raccoons.
Oh yeah,
I'd be like fly fishing in Britannia Park or something, and walking back out to the parking lot past a dumpster, and you turn the headlights on the car, and you see like 9,000 eyes pointed back at you.
We had some, so I lived down in the Florida Keys for a bit, and there were raccoons that lived in the mangroves.
Oh, I saw some
on
of that
some of the islands. Yeah, but it was crazy because they wouldn't have masks. They would be completely gray-faced, which I thought was the most unusual thing ever. And then near my house, there was like a family of them that lived, and they must have all had some sort of like deformity because each one of them, one of their legs was like locked straight on the front, and it wasn't the same raccoon every time. I would see at different places, and then one got ran over at the road, and I noticed it, and I was like, oh man, that one raccoon got hit. And then I saw another one like 2 days later, and I was like, obviously there's like some sort of genetic mutation or I don't know, something that's happened where they all have this weird arm thing. But the mask always was very interesting, of the lack of it.
It's winter, and you can now get almost anything you need for the coldest months of the year delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a ski slope delivered, but you can get dish soap delivered. Sunshine, that's a no. But a bottle of wine, that's a yes. A snow angel, sorry, no. But angel hair pasta, Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol and select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.
This episode is brought to you by Nerds Gummy Clusters, the sweet treat that always elevates the vibe. With a sweet gummy surrounded with tangy, crunchy nerds, every bite of Nerds Gummy Clusters brings you a whole new world of flavor. Whether it's game night, on the way to a concert, or kicking back with your crew, unleash your senses with Nerds Gummy Clusters.
So let's switch over to talk about well, we didn't talk about beaver.
Yeah, and beaver probably burying the lead here. Beaver market is very strong right now, and there's a lot of beaver getting caught all over North America right now, and both for nuisance purposes and for the commercial trade. A lot of what's coming out for the commercial trade is going into, in the last few years anyway, has been going into what we call the hatter market, into the felt market.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of popularity the last few years, thanks to our friend Kevin Costner. Everybody wants to look like a cowboy because of Yellowstone. And, your top-end cowboy hats are made with beaver felt.
I didn't know that. Interesting.
Or with rabbit felt. And at the same time, young men in Europe are wearing hats again for fashion. I don't know. I wear plaid and a camo hat. I don't know the ins and outs of this, but there's a resurgence in like fedoras and stuff in Europe the last few years. So
I just got one a couple weeks ago, or no, not a couple of months ago in December. New one.
Okay, you're more fashionable than I am.
Quite stylish.
I have the look of, if I wear a fedora, I look like I spend too much time on the internet.
I guess the Canada Goose, did the Canada Goose jacket craze make its way into the States as well as
the what?
You didn't, maybe not them. The Canada Goose jackets. They were like a company with a super warm jackets with a coyote fur-lined hood.
Oh, no, but I want one of these.
It was a big deal here for a while.
Yeah, it was probably like 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more. It was the coyote market was wild back then. Like we were seeing like $120 averages on coyotes. I've seen top lot price, like the highest price of actually back up. Most fur is sold at auction. Yeah, a lot of fur is sold at auction. We've got the last wild fur auction house in the world in North Bay, Ontario, at Fur Harvesters Auction. And I've seen, from back then, I've seen numbers like $600 for a coyote.
Oh, wow.
Which is wild. So, and I mean, it was Canada Goose and some of the other big, Macage, Montclair, similar brand, Moose Knuckles. And then, you get, like, those are the top end, and then you've got your kind of mid-level, and then you've got your knockoffs. And, they were very popular in Canada, very popular in a lot of Asian markets as well. China, Japan, Korea. Yeah. So that big, bulky parka with a coyote fur ruff look was very in for a few years.
I think it's still in here in the States. I didn't realize, and I've only ever seen the synthetic ones. That are made. I don't think I've ever seen, knowing what a coyote looks like, I've never seen one. And now that I'm looking at the pictures, but those are pretty cool.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate that, Canada Goose made the decision a few years ago now to stop using fur. And there was like a very targeted, very like mean is understating it, like very visceral campaign.
Yeah, I remember it.
Oh yeah,
against their
at the pictures here
and stuff from some of the EMT groups, and they're a publicly traded company, and they got to the point where it was no longer feasible for them to stay in fur, and it's unfortunate because they were up until they stopped being a supporter of the trade, they were a very good supporter of the trade. And, but there's certainly something that, you can go and buy a parka that has a fake fur ruff on it and take it to a furrier and get them to put a real coyote trim on.
That's good.
That's a good idea.
I will admit to doing that myself, 2 weeks ago. I broke my winter jacket and needed to go buy a winter jacket. So I went to Mark's Work Warehouse. And they're like, this is a great bomber jacket, but it's got a terrible fake fur ruff on it, but thankfully it was one that buttoned off. So I just called up one of my members and I was like, hey, I got a chunk of wolf here from one of our research studies. Can you make a ruff for me that I can put on this coat? He's like, yeah, sure, send it over. I'll take care of it for you.
Oh, that's super cool. That's a great idea. I just bought a new puffy coat, and that would make a great addition to that. First,
and that's something that not necessarily, not necessarily a lot of people appreciate, is that you can take stuff like that to a furrier and say, hey, I'd like to get my fake fur replaced with real fur, or could you put a fur trim on this coat that doesn't have one right now? And certainly if you've got local furriers, they will do that.
Yeah, I don't know. We might be in short supply of those here. We were talking about just getting hides tanned the other day. My buddy Colin and I gave him some. He's having some stuff done, but there's only one or two guys in kind of the Maryland, Virginia, DC area that even dabble in hide tanning. Right. And I was like, huh.
Yeah, I can talk to my American counterpart and find out if there's something near you.
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
Business taxes. Was stressing about all the time and all the money you spent on your taxes.
This is my bill?
Now Business Taxes is a TurboTax small business expert who does your taxes for you and offers year-round advice at no additional cost, so you can keep more money in your business. Now this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com/business. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service.
Let's switch over into some food talk.
Sure.
I guess first question, you think about trapping, and one might wonder, where does the carcass go once the skinning is done?
Yeah, so that's a great question. For a lot of trappers, the carcass goes on the bait pile.
Okay.
And that's the activity kind of recycles itself.
Sure.
You take the last one, feed it to the next one, and there certainly is a subset of trappers that will eat some of what they trap or a lot of what they trap, or they feed it to their dogs or pets or what have you. And guys that have like sled dog teams and stuff, like they'll feed their dog teams off of what they trap. But there's some really good eating in trapping, and I was happy when you guys reached out. I was like, no one ever wants to talk about this part. This is great.
Cool.
Because it's kind of the part that I don't get an opportunity to talk about very often, because we always get beat up on from uninformed people or by selectively informed people. Like, oh well, you only use the skin, you don't eat the meat. And it's like, well, how many deer hunters tan their deer skin? But fair enough.
That's true.
Not saying everybody needs to walk around in fringe jackets, though we'd all look a lot cooler.
It'd be a lot cooler.
And fedoras.
In fedoras and fringed buckskin jackets with a big coyote trim on it.
That's my 2025 style.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it.
Coming soon to an outfit of the day post near you. But, it is like, it's kind of a false dichotomy, because there are a lot of trappers that do eat at least some of what they trap. And, even on the fur farming side, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that people eat farmed mink, but like there are uses for, all of the byproduct from mink farming or fox farming, to have it rendered down into bone meal and blood meal and stuff to use for fertilizer, or, once upon a time here in Nova Scotia, when we had we used to have a fairly thriving mink industry here. And, both mink farming and fox farming started in Canada at the commercially farming anyway. The first attempt, actually, fun history fact going back, is the first attempts at farming mink were during the American Civil War in New York.
Huh.
To try and have a source of mink fur for whatever, army uniforms or something.
Some warmth, warmth in the winter or something.
Yeah, but it didn't quite pan out, but the first commercial farms were here in Canada as well. So, once upon a time here in Nova Scotia, they'd use them for bait in the commercial fishery, like for crab pots and lobster traps. That was one use that they were having for mink carcasses as well. So, like, it's not, a lot of people try and make out that, fur is quote unquote wasteful, but so much of everything is recycled in some way, shape, or form back into the landscape that, it's kind of, in a lot of ways, reduce, reuse, recycle should be the tagline for fur.
Yeah, much more so than synthetics.
Yeah.
One of the coolest places I've seen trapped animals being used, or the carcasses being used, is in Haliburton, Ontario, which is a couple hours away from where I live. There's a place with like a 15-acre wolf enclosure, so that you can see through like viewing glass and kind of see wolves interacting like as wild as you kind of can be, like much more than a zoo, not quite as much as truly wild, but they feed those wolves exclusively trapped beaver carcasses. Okay. So we got to do a tour.
Good.
Yeah, so we got to do a tour of the facility and got to see the walk-in cooler with like 100 stacked dead beavers, skin beavers, and then got to see the wolves eating them, which is pretty cool.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's certainly situations like that of, wildlife parks and wildlife rehabs and stuff where trappers will be bringing carcasses and stuff too as well. So, barring that, it goes back to the landscape. Mm-hmm. And, it's not, I have a 4-year-old. I've been watching way too much Lion King lately. There's kind of circle of life.
Circle of life.
Yeah.
If we're talking about edibility, which ones would we look to eat?
So, I mean, I'd say there's someone out there who has eaten every and all of them.
Yeah.
But I kind of did a bit of an informal poll. I talked to like my board members and some others, and I was like, "What do you guys like to eat from the trap line?" The kind of consensus ones, anyway, were lynx and bobcat, beaver, muskrat, and then depending on whether you count them as a fur bearer or not, like rabbits and hares.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
we're on that list as well.
Man, I tried bobcat for the first time this past year as part of that, like the awareness piece for the Colorado bill, and I put out a recipe, and I like great meat, both that and mountain lion, phenomenal, like good table fare. So I could see why. And beaver's like great.
Beaver's incredible, incredible meat.
Yeah, beaver's so versatile.
Yeah,
like that's the thing that gets me about beaver. It's like you can make ham, and it's like it's ham. Like it's not here as an imitation of ham. It's like, no, this is ham. Like it's there's so much versatility in some of this stuff. I mean, the cats, it's very, you can basically sub it in to any, chicken recipe or lean meat pork recipe. You can make a great, stir fry or, General Tao, bobcat, all kinds of great stuff you can do. And the other one that I don't think is too much of a shock to people. Well, it's a shock to people to learn that squirrels are trapped for like the commercial fur trade. But squirrels can, as long as you're willing to deal with something the size of a squirrel, it's good eating. You're gonna have to stack up plenty of them, but
you're gonna mess of them. You're good. You're
gonna want to stack up plenty of them to make it worth sending to the auction house anyway. So, you'll get your chicken fried squirrel on the go.
What do you think's the most like, not out there, but like probably less consumed?
Pretty much anything in the mustelid family. So your weasels, marten, mink, otter, fisher. I don't know of a whole lot of folks eating those, especially the fish eaters like mink and otter.
Yeah.
It's
fishy and musky.
Yeah, like there's a lot of glands and scent and stuff going on in there that make them, I'd say, a more of a survival thing than anything else. But I'm sure there's somebody out there who eats them. It's the same as not quite the same as, but canids. There's not a whole lot of people eating coyotes and wolves, but I know people, hunters from up north, from Nunavut Northwest Territories, that swear by wolf meat. Like they love to eat wolf meat. I'm like, okay, I'll try it. If I'm there with you, I'll try it. I've eaten some weird stuff in my day, especially when I was still doing fisheries work. Like I've eaten, starfish and stuff off the bottom of the ocean. It's stuff that not everybody is going to go for at the buffet if there's chicken nuggets beside it. But I'll keep an open mind if and when I ever get offered it. But the kind of more consensus, this is good eating type stuff is the cats and cats and the rodents.
Yeah. I wonder why or at what point, because I know beaver was widely consumed for a long time, and I wonder, and maybe you know the answer to this, like what the paradigm shift was of like, oh, we're just going to deal with the furs now or not at all, and just kind of leave beaver out of the picture when we talk about table fare.
I mean, I think a lot of it kind of corresponds to the adoption of the North American law of wildlife conservation and the overall discomfort with the idea of commercial exploitation of wildlife for like commercial meat purposes.
Yeah.
And not saying that's a bad thing, but it's, you see the same thing, honestly, in a lot of ways with bear, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That bear used to be a very commonly consumed meat. Some of the top chefs, Escoffier in his cookbooks, talking about bear fat. There's some of that stuff that just went out of style, I guess, more than anything else, as we moved out of the market hunting, era. And it's difficult to try, and especially something like beaver, where not everybody knows a hunter, or knows a trapper, sorry. It's just more out of reach for people. And the people that do get exposed to it, I would say probably most of them really, really enjoy it. But it's so much more difficult. Back to kind of where we started is it's how many people in North America today know a trapper personally.
Very few, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I would say probably very few. That would be an interesting poll to take out.
Yeah. Yeah. So unless you're at like a wild game dinner or something, how are you ever going to encounter beaver meat?
Yeah, I encountered it on the freshly killed on the road, which is how I got mine. I wouldn't have been able to get it otherwise. Yeah.
Somebody texted me the other day and they're like, "Hey man, there's a beaver, mile marker this and this." And I was like, "That's great, but that's a really busy road and I don't think I'm going to go out there and like potentially get hit." I was like, how fresh is this beaver? They're like, "Well, it wasn't there when I went on my way to work and it was there on my way back." And I was like, that could be anywhere from 8 hours to, I don't know.
Yeah.
Let the vultures take care of that one.
And there's depending on when you're trapping them, where you're trapping them, the condition of these animals. If we're talking about under ice beaver trapping in northern Ontario, that beaver is going to be in great condition regardless of when you go get it. But, it does take, I'd say, a skillful hand to make sure that these things are treated properly. And I mean, it's the same as any wild game, right? It's just that the margin for error might be a little bit more narrow when it comes to stuff like fur bears, and making sure you get every single bit of fat off. That just puts it out of reach for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But then also, how can we find ways to connect the people that want it with the people that have it? So, like, I know that our provincial affiliate in Quebec, the Fédération de Capitale Gestionnaire Québec, they've worked on a pilot project the last few years with food banks in Quebec City and Montreal, where there are large Indigenous populations of folks who have come in from remote communities and now are in the city and are kind of stuck in the city. To make, wild game and in this case, fur bear meat available at food bank. So there's a culturally relevant food bank offering. So it's not all ground beef and chicken, right?
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So they've donated, I think, a couple 100 pounds of beaver meat every year.
Oh man, that's great. So with that, you kind of spare up this question. Looking back through history of trapping in North America, and we've got a lot of like Indigenous involvement in it from the beginning into, I don't know where we stand now with it, but is there more to learn from that traditional sense of both trapping, from sustainable harvest, and then sort of like the consumption of it that we as hunters and trappers could take a note from those Indigenous traditions?
Yeah, I think always. It's something that I've been lucky enough to work really closely with Indigenous communities on a few things throughout my career, both in the fisheries world and since coming to the Institute. And, even stuff that, looking at traditional calendars where it's 13 seasons and it's like, this is the season where we pick eggs and this is the season where we hunt beluga and this is the season where we do XYZ. Mm-hmm. Those are the kinds of things that can help inform us. And being shared that traditional knowledge, using that to help inform us on management of species and how we approach things. Different uses for furs, different uses for animals. There's a lot that we can learn. There's a whole lot left that we haven't learned yet. And at the same time, I think that trapping, more so than a whole lot of other things we do here in North America, has been informed by Indigenous teachings from day one. Mm-hmm. And continues to be. I mean, the conibear trap, like the modern, body gripping trap that every trapper in North America pretty near uses some version of, was invented by an Indigenous trapper. Like, so it's not even that, we got everything we needed in the 1600s, and ever since then we've been doing it our own way. Indigenous folks continue to be a very important part of trapping in North America today.
No, that's awesome. No, that's good.
So, say our listeners are interested in trapping. What can they do to support the fur trade, to learn more about the fur trade? Are there resources out there? Do you know if the trapping license, I'm hammering you with a bunch of questions, but do you know if the trapping licensing system is the same in Canada as it is in the United States?
So I'll answer your last question first because it's the longest answer. Okay. Very different. Okay. The way that the trapping is managed in the U.S. versus the way the trapping is managed in Canada are very different. Similar in that it's largely managed at the state and provincial levels. Mm-hmm. But it even varies a lot between states and between provinces.
Yeah.
So, I did my trapping ed course here in Nova Scotia. It was the pilot for the 2-day trappers course. Usually it was a 1-day course, 8 hours. Trapping Association was pushing to extend it to 2. In Ontario, it's 4. I think.
Yeah, it's a 4-day.
It's 2 weekends. Yeah. In Canada, we do have the kind of unifying piece of the Agreement on International Humane Trapping Standards, which means that pretty much everyone is trapping using similar equipment for similar species. The U.S. has a complementary agreement to the AIHTS. So the agreement is between Canada, the European Union, and the Russian Federation. And really what it was to set basic standards for humane trapping to allow Russian and Canadian fur to continue to flow into the European market. Mm-hmm. Because of the way the trapping is managed in the U.S., they have a separate agreement with the European Union because the federal government couldn't impose those kinds of limitations on the states.
Okay.
So, my counterparts at AFWA, at the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, they publish what they call the BMPs, the Best Management Practices for Trapping. And there's one for, I think they've got 22, 23 species now. But those aren't mandatory. Whereas in Canada, if you want to trap a beaver, you go and look at the Fur Institute of Canada certified trap list, and those are the traps you can legally use to trap a beaver.
Okay.
So it's there's a lot of variation, and some of it's good, some of it's bad. I'm not saying everything we do is perfect or everything that is Canada's better than US or US is better than Canada, because there is so much variation. In terms of what people can do to support the fur trade, buy fur, first and foremost. If you're in Canada, you can go to fur.ca and go to our Where to Buy Fur page, and you can find FIC members that sell fur, hopefully one near you, or one with an online store. That above anything else is probably the best thing to do. If you are someone that's interested, if someone out there is interested in getting involved in trapping, they can check out our website at fur.ca. They can check, if they're in the States, they can check out Fur Takers of America or National Trappers Association, get some information there, get connected to their state or provincial associations and get some information there. For folks that want to get more information writ large, they can check out truthaboutfur.com, which is our blog that has kind of interesting stories about, people who are involved in the trade and what they do, or news that's going on in the industry. We have a podcast as well, Truth About Fur podcast, that we put out once a month or so. Folks can find that on the Blood Origins Canada YouTube page or the Hunter Conservationist feed on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're doing everything we can to kind of meet people where they're at on this stuff, to get people some reliable resources that they can look at. And, some people like to read, some people like to listen to podcasts. I listen to way too many podcasts. I'm one of those people. But it's really everything that we can do to try and put the reality of trapping, the reality of fur farming, the reality of sealing, the reality of fur in front of people to, try and deprogram people of 50, 60 years of legitimately propaganda. Not saying that in a pejorative sense, even, but, the stuff that once upon a time when I was still in university was writing papers about propaganda. I was writing papers about PETA and the IFAW and Humane Society and saying they did a lot of stuff right to meet the goals that they themselves set. I don't agree with their goals, but if you were trying to build a campaign to achieve those goals, they did a very good job of doing it. And, I was told shortly after I joined the Institute about 3 years ago, I was told, the Fur Institute of Canada is one of the best kept secrets in conservation. It's why are we keeping it a secret?
It should be a secret.
We need to tell everyone. because we underpin a lot of things even beyond the commercial fur trade. You know, the Fur Institute certified traps are used in nuisance trapping and in predator control and livestock protection. So, you know, we spend a lot of time talking about the commercial fur trade, but we also play a role in that broader trapping community beyond just the commercial trade.
So I feel like we need to have you back on and crack into some more of these sub genres of trapping. And I want to hear about all of them.
I was looking to just for so I hunt in Maryland, and Maryland has, in order to be a fur trapper here, you have to do fur trapping education, which is a 4 to 6 hour course that you have to do, and it covers benefits of regulated trapping, state and national trapping organization, trap types, fur bearers, management, laws, best practices, safety, ethics, trap preparation, bait lure, land set, water set, cable restraints, animal welfare, fur handling, and then you have to pass a test at the end and get an 80. So
yeah, like there's a lot that can go into becoming a licensed trapper, and you know it's because, you know, we got it hammered into our heads when I did my course of like, you don't want to be the trapper that ends trapping.
Yeah,
like you know, it's my day job to be the guy calling up the news outlet of saying, hey, someone's dog got killed in a snare, and here is why. Yeah, our heart goes out to the people whose dog got killed. Here is what, you know, we're doing as an industry to try, or as a trade, to try and make sure that doesn't happen. You know, it's oftentimes, if I can get my way into the story, you know, it'll be like 3 anti-groups and me, or 3 anti-groups, the provincial association and me. You know, slowly but surely we're getting to the point where reporters are understanding that they need to try and balance these stories, and that the Fur Institute is somewhere they can come to get that balance, to find the voice that's in favor of trapping. You know, we call ourselves Canada's national voice for the fur trade. It really is something that, you know, is something that not every provincial association has a bunch of staff to be able to handle. You know, they're largely volunteer organizations, and it's the same in states, as far as I'm aware. You know, these are organizations that are largely volunteer run. They might have a staff person or two. You know, it can be difficult to be your president of the Trappers Association because you want to really, like, help support trappers. It's something that I tell our associations, like, hey, if you get calls from the newspaper or from TV station, whatever, give me a call and we can work out what it is you want to say. Like, this is something I know how to do, and that the Institute wants to be able to support you in doing. Because, you know, I used to tell politicians what to say. I can help you figure out what it is you want to say, too. And, you know, that is something that every time we can get into that story and have the story be balanced, that's the thing that's one little point on the bar up in our favor in keeping the practice of trapping alive, or keeping the commercial fur trade alive. You know, it's something that I've said a few times in interviews, right? You can get rid of commercial trapping, but you never get rid of trapping. You just make it so that government employees are the people who do the trapping.
Yeah.
Like, France killed more muskrats last year than Canada did, but every muskrat that got killed in France went to the incinerator or to the landfill.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they kill like a couple 100,000 muskrats a year. They have like very severe issues with invasive muskrats in the Netherlands and France, a couple other countries. Raccoons as well, like some severe issues that they manage through trapping, because it's the only way you can do it. And, you know, we work with European countries. Like, we'll have European regulators reach out to us because our trap testing program at the Institute, you know, our trap testing program and the trap testing program at AFWA are the 2 most advanced programs in the world. So countries that are signatories to the agreement by virtue of being part of the European Union, if they need to certify traps to use them for nuisance animal control, they don't have the facilities to actually do that. So they'll come to us. Like, we've certified traps for the Spaniards and French and Dutch and Finnish and a few different European nations, because they're like, you guys actually know how to do this. Can you help us out? We have trap manufacturers here in our country, but we don't have the ability to actually do the testing the way that you guys do. Yeah, you can never get rid of trapping unless you're willing to get rid of roads.
Yeah,
because beavers
culverts
and every culvert in your road will eventually get blocked by beavers. Every bank will get eaten out by muskrats or dug out by muskrats. Every sheep you have will get eaten by wolves. Every ground nesting bird you have will get eaten by raccoons. Like it's kind of an apocalyptic vision, but it's just to kind of spell out the absurdity of the idea of ever getting rid of trapping.
Mm-hmm.
And the easiest way to do that is to maintain a successful commercial fur trade, because then it's rich Europeans and Chinese that are paying for all of these animal control, for wildlife management in North America instead of taxpayers and farmers.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
Makes a whole lot more sense.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I like that. Well, Doug, I think we're out of time. I think I agree with Adam. We'll have to have you back on to dive into more. There's so much more once we hit the surface.
Mm-hmm.
But thanks everybody out there for listening. We'll include all the show notes and links and everything online. And make sure whatever podcast platform you're listening to, punch that 5-star button. Leave us a review. Tell us we're doing right, or tell us we're doing wrong. Thanks everybody. Have a good night.